Okay, what I decided to do today, something a little bit different, something I've been meaning to do for some time. It's a subject that's near and dear to my heart, and it's a subject with a lot of potential discussions that we can have. And that is that my grandfather, blessed memory, I speak about him a lot, as you know, and he was a great man, a real great man, and a voluminous writer and thinker, and a very innovative, creative thinker as well. And he wrote many books. We have like 20 books published already that he wrote, and probably an equal number of books in manuscript form. And I've read most of his writings, not all, but most. And it's phenomenal. His writings are unbelievable. And what I wanted to start doing on occasion is to take a piece or a chapter, maybe a half a chapter, some of them are a little bit long, and to read it, together, and to learn from this great man and some of his very, very powerful ideas. So I was trying to figure out which chapter to start with. And one of my favorites is in his Alei Shur Volume 2. So his most famous book was Alei Shur. Alei Shur is a verse in Genesis. It's part of Jacob's blessing to Joseph when he tells him, Benos Tza'ada Alei Shur, the girls, they went on top of the ramparts, which is a reference that when Joseph was made viceroy of Egypt, he was paraded throughout the city, and all the girls wanted to get a peek, wanted to catch a glimpse of Joseph, and they climbed on the ramparts to get a look at Joseph. That's the name of the book. And why is it called by that interesting name? Because this book is a trip on the ramparts. We're going into a world, we're getting a peek into the world. There's a thick wall separating the world that we're in and the world that we are exploring in this book. The world that we are exploring in the book is the world of Torah, and specifically the world of the Torah scholar, the Torah sage. So this book is an opportunity to climb on top of the ramparts and peek inside and examine what's happening in this wonderful, rich, and glorious world that basically the entire population of the world is ignorant of. That's the idea, Volume 1. Volume 2, it's an absolute masterpiece. It's a tour de force. It's an incredible, incredible book. And in Volume 2, again, there's hundreds of chapters, and each one is a masterpiece. But it's treatises. It's not just chapters, it's treatises. And the first treatise of the second volume of Alei Shur is known as Mareches Ha'adam, which means like the treatise of man, humanity. And there's a chapter called Bechira, which means free will. So let's hear what he says on this chapter. It's the fifth chapter of the first treatise of the second volume, just so you know how to find it. And he begins, and I'm going to read it maybe in Hebrew, and then I'll translate, or maybe I'll just translate. The essential free will is how a person utilizes their inborn talents. All of us were endowed with gifts from God, talents, abilities, temperaments, skills. Everyone's built differently. The fundamental free will that we have to employ, that we have to make decisions regarding, is how we use the talents and the abilities that the Almighty gave us. And he cites the Talmud. The Talmud tells us, very famous teaching in the Talmud, the book of Shabbos, on page 156, towards the end. And it talks about the influences that determine the character makeup, the character build of a person. And it talked about someone who was born with an influence of Mars. Now, what does that mean? It means that Mars is red, and Mars is violent, apparently. Someone who's born with that, under that influence, he is going to be a blood shedder. So this is what the Talmud tells us. Certain people are born, the way they're born, before they make any decision, they're born as bloodshedders. And the Talmud says they have 4 career paths. They could be a mohel. What is a mohel? A mohel is a ritual circumciser. What is a ritual circumciser? It's someone who takes a scalpel that is so sharp, there's no sharper knife that you could buy. I once had a chat with a mohel, and he's a traveling mohel, meaning he's not going to be limited to his city. He'll travel. You want him to come to Houston, Texas to do a circumcision, a bris milah, he'll come. Well, he's got to bring his tools with him. And his tools are very expensive, very, 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 very sharp scalpels. Well, how do you ship that? Some things are not meant to fly, United.com told me. Well, he puts it in his carry-on bag. And he tells me that he carefully, he knows how to camouflage it so that they don't pick it up. The system doesn't pick it up. But then once he was stopped and they examined his bag and they found these knives. But the knife doesn't look like a knife. Because it's a scalpel, it's very sharp, the sides are sharp, but the top is like rounded. So the guy pulls it out. Well, it's like, what's this? So he says to him, nah, this is nothing. And he takes the top of the scalpel and puts it in his hand. Like he shows like it's not sharp at all. It looks like it's something that you would use, I don't know, to file your fingernails with. Now, of course, had he used the side, he would have sliced right through everything. But that's how he managed to get through it. If you're a mohel, you're using very, very sharp knives, and there's blood involved. So someone who is a bloodshedder, that is their natural tendency, that's their disposition, they could choose to be a mohel, and that's someone who plays a very direct part in fulfilling the first mitzvah given to Abraham, the first mitzvah given to our people, the mitzvah of the covenant, the mitzvah of circumcision, that there are 13 covenants related to it. It's one of the very few mitzvahs that override the Shabbos. You are not allowed to make a wound on Shabbos. It's one of the 39 categories of work that's prohibited on Shabbos. However, you are allowed to do a circumcision on Shabbos. It overrides the Shabbos, provided that the circumcision is on day 8. Day 8. Ubayom Hashmini, on the 8th day, you do circumcision, even if day 8 is on Shabbos. So someone who has this disposition, this tendency, this predisposition, this characteristic built in that he needs blood, can find a way to perform the most important mitzvah, or one of the most important mitzvahs, a mitzvah that the Talmud tells us is equal to all 613 mitzvahs combined. The person could also be a ganav, a thief. The person could be a butcher. The person could be a surgeon. There are 4 different career paths open to this person. One of them is the greatest mitzvah. One of them is the worst. You can be a thief, a murderer, a bloodshedder in the way we think of that term. You could be a butcher. Nothing wrong with being a butcher. It's a healthy. You can make a nice living. You could. It's neutral. You could be a surgeon. That's a wonderful occupation. But the characteristic that you have, you were born under a certain influence, whatever that means, different question. But you're born with a certain tendency, that is not changeable. You cannot uproot it. You cannot change that temperament. You cannot take someone who is very cold and stiff in their nature and make them bubbly and lively. It's not possible. Some attributes, some characteristics are hardwired. You cannot take someone who's this quiet, meek, tepid, docile introvert and turn them into a effervescent, bubbly extrovert. It's just not possible. And vice versa, it's also not possible. Similarly, the Talmud tells us, someone is born with an inclination, a predisposition to be a bloodshedder. You cannot undo it. And it all depends on how you use this quality. And the Talmud tells us there are four options: a physician, a surgeon, a thief who will commit murder, a butcher, a slaughterer even, and a mohel. They are all bloodshedders. But the mohel does a great mitzvah. The butcher, well, it's a good thing. It's not. You don't have to eat meat. You can be, of course, a vegetarian. So it's not quite. Even if you are a butcher who does the mitzvah of slaughtering animals, it's not. It's an optional mitzvah. It's not a mandatory mitzvah. When you want to eat meat, you have to slaughter. When you need meat, you have to go to the butcher. The surgeon uses sharp knives to save lives. Only the fourth option, that of the criminal, is using this ability for a negative use. This is the central and most critical decision that a person makes in their lives, where a person decides the path that they're going to take in life, and they're going to determine whether their characteristics that they were naturally endowed with, will they be used for righteousness or for wickedness. So this is how this chapter begins. We're talking about free will, and we're talking about the essential free will, and it's not, we think of free will almost as limited to behavior. It's a choice. Well, do I do this or do I do that? It's almost like a discrete decision that we do 1,000 times a day, 1,000,000 times a day. This is talking about the choice of what we're going to do with our lives. Not everyone has every path available to them. Maybe today's society, it's always telling people, hey, you could be anything you want to be. No, you can't. You can't. Certain things are limited. You cannot be everything you want to be because the Almighty didn't give you that. You don't have the full suite of abilities because everyone is given a certain makeup, a certain character build out, a certain catalog of abilities and inclinations and temperaments and dispositions. And that's going to narrow the field of the potential life paths that they take. So there's a limitation because we cannot change and we cannot alter the characteristics that are hardwired. Now, again, this is an important point, and maybe it's addressed later on, but there are characteristics that we can change. In fact, the Gaon of Vilna, this is not what he writes over here, but the Gaon of Vilna talks about how there are 3 different types of character traits. Some of them are easily changeable, meaning we're already halfway there. It's easy for us to change, either to acquire a good characteristic or to overcome a bad tendency, a bad habit, a bad characteristic, a bad trait. That's the lowest level. It means the lowest level of what we need to overcome, the obstacles we need to clear to achieve that change. The next level are things that are very, very hard for us to change, meaning it's characteristics that are positive that we want, but we have to work very, very hard because we face very stiff headwinds preventing us from accomplishing that. Alternatively, on the flip side, it's certain characteristics that we want to overcome. They're negative in nature, and it's very difficult to overcome, but we can. It is doable with a lot of effort. There is a third level of character traits that are completely and utterly unchangeable. That's what the Talmud's talking about over here. Someone's born, it's almost like the influence, it's like the stars determined, Mars determined, as if saying, using that terminology. It is completely hardwired in their essence, in their nature. There's nothing you can do to change it. No surgery, no pumping someone with steroids or chemical, it's not changeable. This is who you are. This is how the Almighty made you. And for that, your free will is how are you going to play that out? How are you going to deploy? How are you going to manifest that characteristic? And he cites an example for this idea when Samuel was the prophet who anointed the first king of the Jews, an impressive man, a tall man, a great man named Saul. King Saul. Now, King Saul had a very short reign. Why? Because he failed to fulfill the commandment of God. And he was deposed. He was deposed by Samuel, even though no one knew about that. Samuel said, "You're fired." And he was fired, but the whole world, the whole nation thought of him as king. And that created a very sticky situation, as we all know. But Saul is fired. It's time to appoint a new king. Well, who is the new king? It's one of the sons of Jesse. Well, go find Jesse. Jesse's a very great man, one of the 4 people who never sinned, the Talmud tells us. Completely sinless person. 4 people who never sinned. One of his sons is the king. Jesse, I have good news. You're the father of the next king. Can I meet your sons? And he lines all 7 sons up. And each one is inspected by Samuel. And Samuel says, "Is this the guy?" "No, it's not the guy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sons are false alarms. They're not candidates. Jesse, do you have any other sons? Is there anyone else?" "Yeah, there is, but he's not your man. He's not your man. We know him. He's not a candidate. Let me see him nonetheless." And the verse tells us, this is in Samuel 1, chapter 16. It says that Jesse's son David is presented to Samuel. And the first word that we have to describe David, king of Israel, he was an Admoni. He was ruddy. That word appears exactly twice in all of Scripture. It's the first word used to describe Esau, twin brother of Jacob. It's the first word used to describe David, king of Israel. And the Talmud tells us that Samuel, when he saw David, wasn't because of the colors of his hair or of his cheeks or how many freckles he had. He saw that there was some similarity, there was an overlap, there was a character overlap between David and Esau. And he was terrified. This is the next king of Israel, and he's like Esau. So he was fearful, that the Midrash tells us. This is a murderer, like Esau. But then the verse continues, Admoni im yefei einayim. He had pleasant eyes. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that his eyes were really nice and pale blue eyes, like a movie star? What it means is that the Torah and the prophet will never tell us things that are ancillary, that are not relevant. What it means is that, yes, he will be Esau-like. He will be Admoni. He will be a murderer, but it will be with beautiful eyes, meaning it will be done at the guidance and at the direction of the eyes of Israel, which is a name for the Sanhedrin, the leadership, the Torah leadership of our people. They will guide his war. He will act as per the direction of the Sanhedrin, and therefore, this is David, king of Israel. You know, what this midrash is telling us is that indeed it is true. Both David and Esau, they had that influence, the Talmud describes, that they were bloodshedders. One of them is one of the worst villains of all time, and the other is one of the greatest heroes of all time. Once David was anointed as king of the Jews, all future kings for all time can only be direct descendants of David. If you have a king who's not a direct descendant of David, they are fraudulent. they're illegitimate. So David's one of the greatest heroes of our people's history. And he was like Esav. What's the difference? He chose to deploy his Admoni tendencies in the manner of the beautiful eyes that's described, that's attributed to him. He did that in a kosher way. He channeled it in the righteous fashion, and thus he is David, king of Israel. This is the first section of this chapter. It's teaching us about free will. We have free will, and the most essential, fundamental, crucial way that we utilize our free will is to take the characteristics that we have naturally and to understand the different ways that can be used, the different life paths that they could be combined to fulfill. Not everyone could choose every path, but everyone has a path, and everyone has multiple paths, and some of those paths are righteous, and some of those paths are less righteous. And the essential free will is taking the characteristic catalog that we have, the attributes, the temperaments, the dispositions that we have naturally, and finding the most meritorious and righteous way that we can use them to build a life path for us. This is the beginning of the chapter. Let's proceed. This is almost like the chapter is divided into different sections. That was the first section. There are 6 sections in total. Let's go to section number 2. And this actually, it references something which was said earlier. How does a person make a choice? We have the potential for free will, but how does a person actually choose? What he's referring to over here, and we'll see more about this, there is a mitzvah, at least according to some of the sages, to make a choice. Meaning, there's a misconception that we have that we think we're very passive in our choices, in our ethical choices, in our bechira, in our free will choices. The choice comes before us, and you choose right or left. A, B, or C. Which door are you going to go through? Which of these potential options you will have? The truth is, it's a mitzvah to make a choice, which means you have to actively do something to say, this is the choice before me, I understand the choice, and I'm going to make a choice. And it's not something you do passively, it's something you do actively. So he's going to elaborate on this point. We find that our sages define choosing good as fear of heaven. The word fear of heaven, it's a word that modern sensibilities don't necessarily jibe with. Like fear, it's all love now. We think we have a very lovey-dovey attitude towards certainly religion, but God, He's our Father in heaven. We could do no wrong. The idea of fear of heaven, it's something which maybe modern society doesn't really connect with. But the truth is, the Rambam defines all of our spiritual life as being either love of God or fear of God. So it's a major component, it's a major pillar of our religious life. And the Talmud tells us that all good choices are manifestations of fear of heaven. Talmud tells us, this is the book of Nida on page 16b. It talks about the angel who is in charge of conception and what the angel's name is, which is interesting. Angels have names. This angel has a name as well. It's called Lila, which means night, which is interesting. And the angel has a job. What's the angel's job? You got to oversee conception. And the angel takes, we're told, takes the primordial biological matter that's going to eventually become a zygote and an embryo and a fetus and a baby and a human, and takes this primordial biological matter and brings it to God. And the angel tells God what's going to be with this future human. Will this future human be strong or weak? Intelligent or dense? Rich or poor? So the Talmud tells us, Book of NETIV, page 16b. It's already predetermined. A lot of what we think of success and failure in life, to be strong, not weak, to be intelligent, not a dunderhead, to be nice and rich, wealthy, and not poor and impoverished. Talmud tells us that's predetermined way before even birth. This is at conception. However, whether the future person to be born will be righteous or wicked, that is not determined. Whether the person be rich or poor, strong or weak, intelligent, smart, clever, or a fool, that's determined. Righteousness or wickedness, that is what we call free will. The person is endowed with the ability to choose either path. And the Talmud tells us there's a statement that pairs with this idea. Everything is in the hands of heaven, aside from fear of heaven. Hakol b'yedei shamayim. Everything's in the hands of heaven, chutz, except for, besides, fear of heaven. Besides the verse in Parshas Eikev, now, O Israel, what does God want from you? Only fear of heaven. What we're learning in this paragraph is that free will is that's our role. That's the choices that we make. That's the impact that we have in our life. We don't choose our name. We don't choose our parents. We don't choose the time in history that we're born into. We don't choose how tall, how strong, how handsome we are, even though I understand there are some surgeries that can make you taller. I think they're a little barbaric. You have to put in like metal plates into your legs so you'd be a little more vain. And I'm sure it's not good for you. Now it's very popular. People go to Turkey to get hair transplants. Okay, because they don't like their male pattern baldness. And of course, there are all sorts of injections, I've been told, to make your hair look, not your hair, your skin and your wrinkles go away. But still, how strong you are, how physically attractive you are, these things are, a lot of it's predetermined. And we're also told how rich and poor you will be is predetermined. Your IQ, they say, we got to play Mozart. It's the child in utero that raises their IQ. You start reading to them. Oh, the places you'll go. Get them good tutors, SAT coaches. All that's nice, but it's marginal. And a lot of those gains, actually, there's a reversion. There's a reversion. Those don't last. It's a gift. Whatever Hashem gives you, it's what you have. What do you have? What say do you have in determining who you are and what you're going to become? That is what's known as free will. And the Talmud says everything's in the hands of heaven besides fear of heaven. And thus free will and fear of heaven are the same. That's what the Talmud tells us. It's another name for free will, is fear of heaven. The Almighty gave before us paths. And the path of righteousness is known as the path of fear of heaven. So what does it mean to choose good, to make the right choice? It means to choose with an attitude of fear of heaven, meaning with a recognition, with a cognizance, with a sense, with a fundamental sense of the existence of God, the omnipotence, omniscience of God. When you're aware of that, when you're cognizant of that, when that is the determining factor and the overarching reality in your life, then you'll choose righteously. You'll make the right choices. So when our sages are telling us that we have to choose, A, and when we choose righteously, that means that we choose out of fear of heaven. It means that when someone realizes the existence of God, it's not just an idea. It's not just something that you are aware of because you're religious, because you are part of this congregation, because that's how you were raised. That's your affiliation. It's a fear of heaven. It's a recognition of a certain reality. That is the way to influence your behavior, your choices, and certainly your career choice, like we mentioned earlier. Now, he cites a teaching of Rabbeinu Yonah, who writes that there are different levels of free will. Meaning that we thought free will is something which is, you're passive to. Choices come to you, you got to choose right or left. We discover something which is you have to actively do, be aware of. Like, these are my options, and I have to make a choice. Most people don't make active choices. Rabbeinu Yonah says that there are different levels of free will choice. It's not all the same. Not all free will choices are the same. There's a way to earn a higher level of a free will choice. Now, what's that? So he cites a teaching in the Talmud. It's a teaching about Job. Job, the Talmud tells us, Job wanted to exonerate the entire world from judgment. Why would Job absolve the whole world from judgment? So Job said, Master of the world, you created the world. And all cows are cows, and they all split hoofs. And all donkeys are donkeys, and they all have a lack of split hoofs. So one's kosher, one's not kosher. And all cows are kosher, and all donkeys are not kosher. And you also created someplace called Gan Eden, paradise. So you would create someplace called Gehenna, which is purgatory. And you also created righteous people and wicked people. There's good, there's bad in your creation. And humanity is no different than animals. Some are righteous and some are wicked. Job was making an argument. Rashi explains what the essence of his argument was. He was arguing that the Almighty, by giving us an evil inclination, the Almighty was deterministically condemning us to a life of sin. How could you avoid sin? You have this very powerful, this almost unlimited force within you that's designed by God Almighty to make you sin. How could you possibly avoid ever sinning? And therefore, anyone who sins, there was no way they could have possibly overcome it. That's what Job was saying. And Job's friends responded to him. They said, "You are repudiating fear of heaven. There's a factor that's not part of your calculus, and that is fear of heaven. Fear of heaven, that can help you override and defeat and trounce the Yetzer Hara. And therefore, if someone does not use this super powerful tool of fear of heaven, it's on them. They were not condemned to a life. They're not doomed to a life of sin because of the Yetzer Hara. They have the trump card. They have the ability to override that, and that is fear of heaven. Once a person has fear of heaven, they are not condemned to live a life of sin. Now, where do you find this fear of heaven? How do you get a bounty of fear of heaven? You're born, child's born. There's no discernible indication that they have any fear of heaven. So, how do you get fear of heaven? How do you acquire fear of heaven? How do you access fear of heaven to overcome the Yetzer Hara? What is this fear of heaven that's going to determine our righteousness and our success in our free will challenges? Job's friends continued, the Almighty created the Yetzer Hara indeed, but He created the Torah as its antidote. Why is the Torah the antidote of the Yetzer Hara? Because the Torah is a wellspring of fear of heaven. Embedded in the Torah is fear of heaven. And any little drop of Torah that you learn is a drop of Torah, a drop of fear of heaven, is a drop of fear of heaven that you have absorbed. And this neutralizes the Yetzer Hara. And he notes that when the Talmud tells us, when it's documented in the conversation of Job and his friends, when the Talmud says that the Yetzer Hara is defeated, is overcome by the Torah, the word I used, the Torah is the antidote, it's not precisely the word that the Talmud uses. The Talmud calls the Torah a tavlin. Tavlin literally means a spice. A spice. The Torah is a spice for the Yetzer Hara, meaning the Yetzer Hara is bitter. It's bitter because it's powerful and it could cause you to do bitter things and make bitter mistakes and have bitter regrets. But there is a spice that you could drop into it that removes all the bitterness. It doesn't eliminate the Yetzer Hara. It spices it up. It makes it pleasant. It sweetens it. It makes it not a problem. It removes the pungency, the bitterness. And that's the Torah. Once Torah is added, once this bounty of Yetzer Hara is of Yira, of fear of heaven is added to the mix, the venom of the Yetzer Hara is neutralized. What we see over here is that free will on its own is a very low level of engagement in this game. When Job was questioning, when he was challenging the notion of free will, the notion of us being able to determine our righteousness, and his friends responded to him, no, you have it wrong. They're not telling him you're repudiating free will. They're saying you're repudiating fear of heaven. Fear of heaven is a factor that wasn't mentioned previously. Job is saying, well, the cows are kosher and the donkeys are not kosher. Some are kosher, some are not kosher. There's heaven, there's hell. There's righteous, there's wicked. So what's the response? Free will. That's not the response. The response is fear of heaven. If someone just uses free will alone, maybe it's not enough to answer Job's question. It's not enough for them to disentangle themselves from the trap that the Yetzer Hara ensnares most in. With the superpower of free will alone, maybe Job's question is not answered. The Yetzer Hara maybe still emerges on top. And you know what? Even fear of heaven, maybe that's not enough. Fear of heaven, you think of fear of heaven. The fear of heaven. Sometimes you're fearful, sometimes you forget about it. That's not exactly what they said. They didn't say fear of heaven. They said fear of heaven that is found in Torah. What the Talmud is telling us here is that the most powerful form of free will, it's free will, it's the recognition that you're making a choice, number one, and you're employing a very powerful tool. Fear of heaven, not just ordinary garden variety, vanilla fear of heaven that you found in the well springs of Torah. That is the ultimate trump card. It's the ultimate superpower. The fear of heaven that is found in the Torah, and that is the highest level of free will, because that can actually neutralize. It's the neutralize, meaning not by trouncing, not by defeating, but by sweetening, meaning eliminating the sting of the Yetzer Hara. And indeed, our sages tell us that this high level of free will that is guided by fear of heaven, and not just ordinary fear of heaven that comes from the Torah, that is embedded in this great gift of Torah that the Almighty gave us, that is mivateles hirhurim, which means that it eliminates, it dissolves the fantasies that the Yetzer Hara, or the rumblings of bad ideas that the Yetzer Hara places in our head. So this is the end of the second section of this chapter. Again, the chapter is talking about free will, and really the treatise it's about humanity. It's about life. Like, what does it mean to live as a human? And I like it because it's almost laying out for us. It's laying out for us a big subject, the subject of free will. And we learn about different angles of this subject. The first thing we learned is that certain parts of our life are fixed, are unchangeable. And there's this very basic level, but a very fundamental level of free will, and that is to choose what career path, what life path you're going to take based upon the collection, the mix of different characteristics that you have embedded within you that are innately part of who you are, that are hardwired to who you are. David was like Esav, but what separated the two? Free will. How are you going to deploy your Esav-like tendencies? Esav could have been like David had he chose better. Then we learned about the idea that the Talmud tells us. Talmud tells us that everything's in the hands of heaven besides the fear of heaven. Well, what's in our hands? Our free will. And what's that called? It's called fear of heaven. That's what makes someone righteous and not wicked. And then the Talmud sharpens it for us. The highest level of free will, it's found in the conversation, the dialogue between Job and his friends, where Job was saying, he was questioning the idea of free will. We have such a powerful Yetzer Hara. It's very, very powerful. It's very potent. And who could succeed? Who could possibly triumph over this? And the answer that he learned, that we learn, is fear of heaven, and not just fear of heaven found in Torah. That is the ultimate weapon in the war against the Yetzer Hara, in the war of free will. Now, I'm going to stop over here now. This is page 38 and 39 of volume 2 of Alei Shur. And like I said, it's a very large book, more than 700 pages. And we covered about 2 pages. But I think it's, I always call my grandfather, and I very, very infrequently say, okay, let's read a chapter. Let's see what he's saying. Maybe we should go through the whole book. I don't know. But I decided it's a nice idea to do this. And I hope to at least finish this chapter. And if y'all like it, maybe we'll do more chapters in the future. But this was the idea that I had. And let me know what you think. RabbiWolbe@gmail.com. Please, God, I'm committing now to finish this chapter. The chapter, again, in volume 2, in the first treatise, the 5th chapter. It's a fun chapter. And there's actually the 6th chapter is related, so maybe we'll do that as well. But I think this is a nice series to do. We just had the 20th yahrzeit, the 20th anniversary of the passing of my grandfather. So I think it's a nice excuse to spend more time studying his works and his writings. And the 2nd volume of his Alei Shur, it's like an easier read. It's a more fun read. So it flows much better. It's the first volume you got to read it very slowly. It's very dense. I like it because you really have to sweat over it to find out what he's trying to say. But he made it easier. There's 20 years separating the publication of the first volume and the publication of the 2nd volume. So this one's easier and it's more sprawling. So it's wonderful. So I'm looking forward, please God, to continuing this chapter. Again, it's about free will, a central element of our understanding of human life. What makes humans humans? Why are we not like animals? Why are we not like angels? The answer to both of that is free will. There's some variability amongst humans. Why is there variability? Because the Almighty gives us a little bit of a say in how we're going to turn out. And we're learning these different models of that. We have the model of choosing how we're going to live our life, and we have the idea of deploying the free will and the way it's described with fear of heaven. And fear of heaven, the kind of fear of heaven that comes from Torah, that's a very high level of free will. We hope to be worthy and meritorious to have that level of free will and become a great people ourselves. Okay, to be continued, chapter 5 of section 1 of volume 2 of Alei Shur. My address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com.